Hi, everybody. So the first great move that Michael and Zia made is choosing an analog twin to give a digital twin conversation. So I'm excited to bring my expertise in life to place here today. I'm talking about a big subject. Digital twinning is a huge subject, and it calls for a definition because the reality is there's so many ways to talk about it in so many different types. So digital twinning is a virtual replica of a real-world counterpart that typically involves a data integration layer to move from a static interpretation to a dynamic, live, real-time analysis or simulation. So there are tons of different digital twins. We have seen, even recently in the news, NASA created a digital twin of the sun in order to study solar flares and look at risk mitigation across the world. We have seen digital twins in manufacturing to study factory floors and look for optimization. We've seen digital twinning in biomedical fields to move drug trials quicker through FDA approval. And they're vastly used because you can simulate rapidly without having to take anything into the real world to go do that test. In our industry, I want to talk specifically about spatial digital twins. Spatial being the key word there because they're contextualized. So you can think about this room, for example. Spatial digital twin would include the walls, it would include the floor, it would include the chairs. And what a spatial digital twin is you've got your digital infrastructure mirroring your physical infrastructure with a data connector, so that you can feed information back and forth between that digital and physical to make sure that your simulations truly capture that existing condition. Now, that's not to say that that's a small definition. The reality is that the scale between spatial digital twins is vast. We could talk about an individual object. You make a digital twin of this clicker. You could talk about a civic scale. Digital twins are being made of entire cities to study infrastructure, to look at energy simulations. So it's really important, if I haven't dialed it in yet, to understand the digital twin that you want to build if you're thinking about building. We've heard a lot about this. We've been talking about this entire time, data. We heard from Genevieve yesterday and Ron. Data is huge right now. You know, data is queen. And within data, it's really a mask for this conversation around artificial intelligence. And the moves that we're making right now in artificial intelligence really scream the question of what can we do with our data now? We have so many capabilities, so much opportunity, and digital twinning can really scrape off of these opportunities that we're seeing in data and AI to push the conversation further. Why am I talking about this? Well, I work for a company called WD. We've been within the retail, in and around the retail industry for over 57 years. We've done over 54,000 projects across 95 countries. And we've been listening to all of you. We've been listening about the goals, about the problems, about the opportunities, about the possibilities that you guys are all looking at within your businesses. We've been understanding from different client types, from different clients within the client organizations at large, all with different questions that are coming up at different times. And alongside of us listening, our tools have been changing. As an architect, I wasn't quite in the drafting stage, but entered up in computer-aided design and CAD, and now currently with tools like building information modeling, our drawing tools have become data tools. And we recognize the power of that. We have moved from design documenters into the opportunity of being digital infrastructure builders. And that's really the first part of creating digital twinning. So we recognize within, I break down a building life cycle into 3 phases. We have design, we have build, and we have management. We recognize within these that when we step in and help primarily within our design and build categories, we have a tremendous amount of opportunity to craft value for the management down the way. Building information modeling, or BIM, used for digital infrastructure, has been the primary tool set that we've been aiding our design and build partners with up until now. But with the opportunity of adding Digital connectors, we're able to take, just going from that 5% of a building life cycle in that design build, and really look at the bigger picture of 95% of the building life cycle happens in that management category. How do we help aid the other parts of the organization that can benefit from that data? Looking at the opportunities to take digital infrastructure, build in more real-time opportunities through things like sensors, IoT devices, adding in a data layer to that really comes back and integrates with the building infrastructure that you've created, or digital building infrastructure that you've created. You can really look at creating something that provides value on an ongoing basis through that full 100% of your time. And we're seeing companies that are doing this. I've been tracking really closely with what's happening in the space with NVIDIA. I think NVIDIA has been really publishing a lot in terms of how they're helping retailers, Lowe's being a big one that's been on the forefront recently. They are looking at ways to create store optimization, to look at merchandising, and really think about how merchandising flows for the use cases. They're looking at augmented and virtual reality in order to do customer journey mapping or test new concepts in a store, not just at a single level, but at a multitude. And then lastly, thinking about our facilities teams, what can digital twinning do if you can truly capture the energy used within your buildings? If you know when a refrigeration unit has broken, and not just that it's broken, where it is, who maintained it last, what's happening within that facility. This, I think, has a tremendous amount of value at a single store level. And I think all of us can think about that one problem store in the back of your head that's a unique snowflake, but now think about that when you've got your entire fleet. What does that mean if you can gather information, test new store concepts, understand the energy output or need state across an entire fleet of your stores? I think after yesterday's conversations, I heard some buzz of a little bit of a feeling of overwhelming. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and the questions are, how do you get there? Where do you start? Rob gave a great quote early in the morning supporting Kroger. You know, there is an elephant. How do you eat it? One bite at a time. So let's talk about those one bites. So we like to start with thinking about phases, 3 phases, scoping. What does scoping look like? Well, we went through that massive task of defining digital twinning. It's important to really understand what you're asking for. Digital twins are not just, I want to build, quote unquote, a digital twin. It's what kind of digital twin do you want to build? What are your goals? Who are your stakeholders? You've got to pull those people on the table in order to start this process without having to go back and rework. And it's important to remember that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the answers when you get to the table, but you start to have a vision in order to craft the right scaffolding to create this message. This is where we talk about evaluating your existing data. I think we heard from Ron last night, more data can be better than clean data. I agree, but I also want to say clean data is important because clean data means clean processes. And clean processes means that you're going to be managing the data ongoing in the right ways. So within that first phase, it's really about aligning. Then you get to building. And building is an important phase because you're going to start filling gaps and holes. You're going to make sure that your data is all in one place. You are going to create the right infrastructure to start supporting this. This is also where you might be tagging assets if you're looking in the facilities realm. And then ultimately establishing a management protocol. I think it was really interesting going back to Lowe's and NVIDIA. They talked about touching their digital twins 3 times a day for each location. Now that doesn't necessarily mean manual, don't let that fear you, but that means that you're updating things constantly. And you have to have the right protocols in place to be able to make sure that your dynamic information that you've spent money on, spent time on, stays relevant. Lastly, it's the integration. Mapping out that data connectivity on top of your models, putting out the IoT devices, making sure everything works, validating that information transfer setting up those dashboards so that your entire organization can benefit. Where is that one point where you can access to see everything? Are you seeing the right things? This is that integration step, that kind of finalization that gets you to the place of digital twins. Let's talk about some real life examples. So I'm going to talk through 2 conditions that we've dealt with alongside of our great client partners. One kind of on the early stage, really just focusing on scoping. The other looking at a more holistic approach. We recently engaged with a major home improvement retailer with over 2,000 stores nationally to talk to them about their data. The question that came to us was from their store planning team asking about their opportunity to go from a AutoCAD-based system to a Revit-based system and what opportunities that opened up within their organization. We met with over 20 business unit stakeholders. We sat down across 3 days devoted with them and found some conditions that I think all of us can attest to having a little bit of our own within our organization. There were data silos. There were teams where data was falling off a cliff. There were manual data transfers. We were talking yesterday about emails and phone calls. How about water cooler talk? Have you guys ever just been passed a bit of information just running by someone in the office? That's just ad hoc. So how do we decrease the amount of manual information transfers, decrease the amount of information silo, and look at an opportunity to create a more dynamic and active way of transferring information throughout an organization? We reorganized their structuring for them. Looked at the opportunity of moving from a drawing tool to a data tool, from moving from manual processes to automated processes, using existing systems that they had in place, existing project management software, existing enterprise software that they were using for their facilities tracking, for other things, in order to look at the full loop of information to try and assess a way that they could move things less manually, more automated, cleaner data output to achieve their goal of knowing what was in their store. Through this process, this team is still, has now taken this information and is moving it through the channels to look at a more enterprise-wide solution of how their data moves throughout their organization. They're estimating ROIs of up to $8 to $10 million a year within their isolated kind of organization once they fully roll this out. And they are still in process on making sure that they can kind of move everything forward. But I think it's an interesting application of saying, what happens when you start to take those manual processes out? What happens when you start to organize your data? What are the opportunities moving forward? And how does that create more efficiency and long-term scaffolding for their future goals, which are to move towards digital twinning, to look at even more future technologies in order to progress their organization forward. Now let's take a look at another example that's a little bit more fully fledged in development. So we just hit on a team that's in the scoping phase. Let's talk about one that's moved further. We were engaged with a wholesale retailer who had asked us to help build out their digital infrastructure. The original ask came from their architectural department, requesting that we help augment an almost non-existing data pool for them in order to help with their remodel program. We went out and utilizing our in-house reality capture team, we did LiDAR scanning for them that we then took into full as-built documentation, building completed models, incorporating all systems, all assets within their digital building in order to create 600 locations in Revit for this team. Here's where the pivot happened. Their parent organization came in about midway through and requested that we use this data, now clean, started from scratch, established by standards data in their digital twinning platform. They were currently working on a 2-dimensional digital twinning platform for their facilities team at large, incorporating thousands of locations, and we're looking to move that to a 3-dimensional use case. We worked alongside of their team, figuring out how the data would transfer, using processes and data normalization and harmonization, essentially being able to pull data sources from a bunch of different things. I used an example yesterday. It's like saying your wine glass equals your purse equals your shoe equals all the same thing. It's a way of moving through that data to make sure that you can read it across different systems and you're pulling it in the right ways. So we worked alongside of their in-house technical team to incorporate the data that we were collecting and building into their digital twinning platform. Now this team is striving for hundreds of locations in this system by next year. They are working ferociously on getting through data. We've been isolating, the data on this initial 600 stores. They have thousands more locations that they're trying to incorporate, and working through all of that data, it takes time. But there's tremendous amounts of strive in this direction in order to get to a fully fledged digital twinning system by hopefully 2028. Now, here's something that I think is really interesting. I was listening to a podcast where Elon Musk was talking about the opportunities of artificial intelligence and stating that in the year 2032, he estimates that artificial intelligence will be stronger than the sum of all human intelligence. That's a huge statement. And I think that there's a ton of potential in that statement. It's not a fear statement so much as it is a ton of potential to look forward and look into the future opportunities that we have right now if we're setting our information up in the right way. So if there's one thing that I can advise you all to do, it's to look within the data that you have existing now. It's to think big as an organization, to talk about the goals and the ideas that you have in the future, and to start to set up the frameworks that'll get you there. Are you collecting the right information? Are you laying down framework that allows you to move quickly when you want to move quickly? And I think all of that somewhat starts in a little bit of a spring cleaning phase of taking a look at the information that you have and making sure that you really get organized. That is all I have for you guys today.